Carolina is recognized for questions.
Mr. Chairman, Congressman Roy's got to be at another meeting. Could you skip over me and go with him?
I certainly will. Gentleman from Texas is recognized for questions.
Thank you, Chairman. I think gentleman from South Carolina. And just a few questions. I'd associate myself with the line of questioning by my friend from Kentucky, Mr. Massey. But just, a couple of observations. The idea that this isn't having a dramatic and real impact on girls and women in sports right now is just ignoring truth. You've got a young lady in Connecticut who was the fastest girl in Connecticut, and then male transgender athletes were allowed to compete and beat her. This girl saying, I lost 4 women's state championship titles, 2 all New England awards, and numerous other spots on the podium to male runners. Now, I'm not there doing a test to the relative level of maleness of whoever it was running against this young lady, but it's a thing. This is happening. I mean, Riley Gaines didn't just make it up. We actually have eyes. We can actually look at the screen and see Leah Thomas and go, well, that was a guy. And then that guy's swimming against Riley Gaines. Riley Gaines competed her whole life, and now Riley Gaines didn't get a chance to win the trophy. That happened. We know it happened. We saw it happen. Anybody watching ESPN and all of their doting over the awesomeness of all of this knows that it happened. We saw it, in fact. It's not made up. It's not manufactured. It's not manufactured when you've got a significant difference between men and women, not just in stature or height or whatever, but things like often having average larger hearts, larger lungs, 12% higher concentration of hemoglobin, which helps transport oxygen to the blood, higher levels of testosterone, typically greater muscle mass on average. These things are just general biological average facts. And so then you get questions. Should the female athletes get to dope in order to compete against the formerly male, sort of still male, now male transgender athlete? Should the female athlete then get to dope and alter her hemoglobin? Like, this is not manufactured. These are real issues. And you have a real situation where you've got parents concerned not just about that, which was the whole purpose of Title IX, to the various questioning of my friend from Kentucky, and into which we had an actual robust debate here about whether or not maybe Title IX should be brought into question in light of the current situation. But there's also the question of parents. This dad writing here, my daughter is forced to play and shower with 4 boys on her high school sports team. She is silenced. I, the father, said, I will not be. There are other examples of parents who have engaged to say, wait a second, should my daughter, I have a 12-year-old daughter, should my daughter be forced to change in a bathroom with a biological male? In whatever degree of trans that individual is. I wonder what the chairwoman thinks about that.
Well, I would wonder what Mr. Tacoma would think about that. I don't think that should happen, but I don't know what Mr. Tacoma thinks. Should biological girls be forced to go into showers?
I'd ask that question as well. Ranking member.
Well, regarding bathroom facilities, locker room facilities, I think these are, regarding the use of which facilities, that's a entirely different matter than what this bill is addressing. My objection to this bill, I want to bring it back to this bill, is a blanket prohibition on trans girls and trans women being able to participate in sports under the threat of the federal government withholding funding. And Mr. Roy, you brought up this example of an elite swimming competition. This bill would not solve the complexities around that issue. I want to remind you that the NCAA, which is the governing the competitive governing body, has its own rules for when transgender people can participate in sports consistent with their gender identity. It has been doing this for decades, as well as the International Olympic Committee. They have accepted transgender athletic competitors, as I said, for decades. This is outside of the scope of government. So but that is being marshaled as an argument for why Title IX is now going to be refashioned through this amendment to ban categorically the participation of transgender girls and boys in sports. That is the core of my objection. Transgender bathrooms and transgender locker rooms, that's another subject to be taken up, and it's kind of extraneous and really not germane to this debate.
So to clarify, you do believe that biological males should be able to use the bathrooms in which our young women are changing and using to participate in sports or otherwise?
Well, being able to access facilities consistent with one's gender identity is critical to the well-being of transgender people. Being unable to go to the restroom or locker rooms consistent with your identity undermines your ability to perform normal daily activities. Arguments that providing transgender people access to facilities consistent with their gender identity will undermine women's safety. Making that argument is really not have any basis in reality. Laws like Title IX, which protect LGBTQI plus people from discrimination, do not authorize anyone to engage in abusive or harassing behavior. So Title IX does not provide a cloak for that kind of behavior. If someone commits an assault, there are criminal laws to punish them. If someone harasses another person, there are laws to punish them. Over 300 domestic violence and sexual assault organizations, including the National Alliance to End Sexual Violence, the National Center on Domestic and Sexual Violence, and the National Center for Victims of Crime, have signed onto a national consensus statement of anti-sexual assault and domestic violence organizations in support of full and equal access for the transgender community. And as these groups have noted, non-discrimination laws do not allow men to go into women's restrooms, period. The claim that allowing transgender people to use the facilities that match the gender they live every day allows men into women's bathrooms or women into men's bathrooms is based either on a flawed understanding of what it means to be transgender or a misrepresentation of the law. And as these groups have further noted, non-discrimination laws protecting transgender people have existed for a long time. And in some cases, these protections have been in place for decades. These laws have protected people from discrimination without creating harm. And none of these jurisdictions have seen a rise in sexual violence or public safety issues due to non-discrimination laws. Assaulting another person in a restroom or changing room remains against the law in every single state.
So yes. So yes.
A transgender person should be able to access facilities consistent with their gender identity.
If their identity. So if they're a biological male and they have the reproductive organs of a biological male, they should be able to use the facilities that a biological female
Let's be
competing
clear.
under Title IX and in female
Let's be
sports
clear that
would use.
men cannot access women's restrooms or facilities. A transgender person should be able to access facilities of the gender that they identify with.
So the answer is yes. So just just one last point on this. Going back to the Connecticut example, just in Connecticut in the past several years, there's 2 male athletes have taken more than 80 sports opportunities from girls. Chelsea Mitchell was the one I mentioned before, who ran for Canton High School, lost 4 state championships, 2 all New England awards. And her quote was this: "It tells me that I'm not good enough, that my body isn't good enough, and that no matter how hard I work, I'm unlikely to succeed because I'm a woman." So is that what we think is the proper result of allowing biological males to compete against biological females in competitive sports? That a female athlete is left unable to compete in that case?
Well, look, the actual experience of both the cisgender and transgender athletes in this case that you mentioned in Connecticut prove how disconnected the claims that transgender inclusion will eliminate women's sports and women athletic scholarships actually are from reality. Chelsea Mitchell, one of the cisgender plaintiffs in the Connecticut case, defeated Terry Miller, one of the transgender athletes, in a Connecticut state championship just 2 days after her lawsuit was filed. All 4 cisgender plaintiffs received scholarships to run track in college, and there are currently, and 3 are currently part of NCAA Division I track and field programs. The 2 transgender athletes were not offered any scholarships, and we don't know of any examples of cisgender women athletes losing scholarships to transgender women athletes. Scholarships are awarded on a variety of factors, including athletic potential, team fit, academic standards, and more, not performance in a single game or competition. And this is just another argument to pit women against each other.
So,
Leading justice in women's sports organizations, including the Women's Sports Foundation, the National Women's Law Center, support the inclusion of trans, intersex, and non-binary students in sports and oppose this bill. And rather than pitting women against each other, we should be working to expand opportunities for all girls and women, opportunities that are severely limited compared to opportunities available to boys and men. Mr. Roy, I've cited a statistic that the Women's Sports Foundation has said and declared that men and boys have 1 million more opportunities than girls and women.
yeah.
That ought to be our focus.
Right.
I hope that you and I could get on, an effort to expand opportunities instead of a false panic over the fact that, over what you claim are trans athletes displacing cisgendered athletes. It's simply not true.
So that was another, I think, 3-minute yes, where, that doesn't really do a whole hell of a lot for Chelsea, who was on the outside looking in for trophies. And I would just say these associations, I mean, whatever, the American Pediatric Association for sticking, our little babies with COVID shots. So I'm not really all that wound up about what associations think. I yield back.
Hey, before you click on the next video, if y'all could do me a big favor and hit that like button. The algorithm loves it, and so do I, because it helps promote these videos and get the message out about what our government has been doing. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications, because every time I put out a video, you want to know about it, right? Thanks again, and have a good one. See you on the next one. Peace.